It's great to be with you all today, albeit morally, not in physical presence, but I guess Zoom is doing a fantastic job with us all, trying to make sure we're all connected. 29 years in hospitality, I always thought the fundamental ethos of hospitality was networking, socializing, and meeting people. Then COVID came. COVID came as a rude shock to everybody, and now everything is out of the window. I think COVID-19 is the mega crisis of our lifetime. I guess, this is once in a century, once in a lifetime that we go through in terms of crisis, especially for the hospitality sector. It's been more of an Armageddon, threatening the good, the bad, the ugly, without any distinctions on what is good, what is bad, and what is ugly. So what I'm trying to touch today is, I would like to look at hospitality during COVID and post-COVID in terms of what our interpretations are on how this hospitality sector will evolve eventually. I want to quote one of the top hospitality players today in the market, Sir Arne Sorensen. He's actually the head of Marriott. And 2-3 weeks ago, when this whole crisis came into being, he described the impact of this pandemic, something he put 9/11 and the 2008 Great Recession together. That illustration, what he gave, was about 3 weeks back. Little did we realize in 3 weeks' time, this issue has quadrupled in what it's turning out to be in terms of a death blow to the hospitality at this moment. By far, I think hospitality was always, it can be argued that it was always criticized for being something very slow to take off, a sector which had very high fixed costs, and it was always due, or rather overdue for a course correction. I think COVID's here, and I think it's showing all the hospitality players around the world, whether it's a small bed and breakfast club living in the UK or the likes of the Marriott, to the Hiltons, to the Intercontinentals. I think the issue has reached an exponential stage where this course correction is now being discussed across the board, across the forum, by almost every single player around the world is feeling it. Just to give you an example, a country like Australia, where Gold Coast, where the bread and butter of theirs is, the economy is based on tourism, has closed off tourists till the 30th of September. And that just explains the amount of disruptions that this has created. However, I think this was also a great time for the entire hospitality team to look within and look at what is the solution that's going to come out of it. Something which can give us a deeper meaning and some exponential results, and going away from the traditional model of being a very fixed, high fixed cost kind of a sector. I think this crisis has pushed all facets of hospitality. I think if we look at hotel owners, we are looking at management companies, we are looking at franchisors, we are looking at franchisees, we are looking at operating teams, and everybody has gone back to the drawing board to say, what is this going to evolve into? How are we going to survive this period to which it evolves to? And when it eventually evolves, what are the adaptations that this industry is going to do for us to be anywhere close to reliant or anywhere close to being relevant in the future to come? I think the experts' opinion of this industry is it's going to take anywhere between 18 to 24 months for this to be a protracted coming of age in terms of what it used to be doing in 2017, 2018. It's likely to trade between 30 to 50% of what it's been trading in 2019. Around the globe, 2019 was supposed to be one of the most successful years for the hospitality in general. With costs going down, with revenue streams going down to 30 to 50% over a period of 2 years, I think where the real crunch is coming is traditionally the hospitality players have been big employment sectors, and that still continues to drive huge employments. So the fixed costs in terms of managing payroll and debt servicing is going to be increasingly difficult in the years to come. So I think the disruption starts from there on how people are going to be managing these costs, how operators are going to be managing these costs, and what intervention various governments in the world are going to come back to the hospitality as an industry to save this from definite extinction in terms of the amount of money that's going to go on to pull this industry back again. But I guess, a lot of players have been coming across and saying that the hospitality sector is bleeding. It's an understatement. It's hemorrhaging at this moment of time. I think a Band-Aid kind of a solution is not actually a solution for a hemorrhage. It's good to basically cut a few bleeds. But I guess there is a deeper intersection of views and thought process in terms of where this industry is going to go to, which is presently being discussed in all four areas of prosperity. So I guess, a classic example is, let's look at ourselves, hospitality being the social animals we are. The first and foremost thing we would like to do is to network. Network. I think anybody in the hospitality would have said, like, if you've got to be successful in hospitality, this is a very critical element of what we do. I was just looking at the transaction cost of Kumar speaking today. A couple of months, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, it would have been a great opportunity for me to meet you all in person, fly down to Coimbatore, take a cab to the airport, take a flight to Coimbatore, take a cab again to the venue, meet all people, spend an hour, 2 hours, having coffee or a snack with everybody, doing the same talk as what I'm doing today, going back to a hotel in Coimbatore, staying overnight, having breakfast the next day, and the repeat of what I've done traveling to Coimbatore is repeated back to Hyderabad. So approximately 11 different transactions that touches hospitality that I would have created in this one discussion forum if it had happened in normal circumstances. And that is just one of the billions of transactions that has gone haywire today. Every day, that's the amount of net exponential loss that this hospitality sector is facing through. So that one transaction leading to the entire world is literally wiped off players from all across the board. So you hear about companies for logging, etc., etc. But I guess, again, that's not going deep enough for us to understand where this is heading to. But I'm sure in the next 30 to 45 days to 60 days, I think more and more companies will start having clarity in terms of how do we actually start dealing with this crisis. Because as said, this is a once in a lifetime. This has never happened to us before. And thankfully, hopefully, it never happens again in future. So, hospitality as a sector by itself, as on the stage before COVID, is one of the largest employers of people. So this has dealt a brutal hit on the direct employment of hospitality. Now, nobody is able to calculate today the effect of the indirect employment and the impact it has had on the indirect employment that this sector has created. The last view of JLL, when they threw out this about 10 days ago, was about 284 million direct employments in hospitality across the globe. And almost every single country, every single city is closed for business, which means that hospitality is not only on its knees, it's lying right on the ground at this moment of time. So at this moment of time, however, there are a few sectors which still has glimpses of hope in this particular crisis. I think, good catering companies are able to offer different solutions to customers. Companies like us at Isthara, we do professional living. That's what we do as our business. And, we are classified into the essential services, which means that we are looking at it in a much more positive way in Isthara, that we are actually going to be bouncing back once this crisis is over. So, some indications of what happens during COVID. What is the industry looking at? What are we doing at this moment of time during the COVID pandemic, and how are we preparing ourselves? I think it's a great time to reflect on what Ruskin Bond says. If somebody told me about 2 months ago that, Kumar, you're going to be quoting Ruskin Bond, I would have had a laugh. And I said, I would much rather prefer a beer in the pub. The pub's gone, the beer is gone, Ruskin Bond still stays. So just to quote from him, I think in times of crisis, it's wonderful what the imagination will do. And I think that's precisely hitting the nail on its head. I think in crises like this, the maturity of the players, the leadership comes into play in terms of how to manage this crisis as a whole. During COVID, I think there are three very strong indications, three very strong sentiments that's coming across to us. I think broadly speaking, I think it broadens around austerity in terms of what our company is doing in hospitality to ensure that the austerity measures are taken care of without having a huge impact on its employees. But nevertheless, we've got to understand that it is going to have certain effect on everybody at this moment of time. So how far and how effective are those austerity measures that we are going to be putting in place? And the second important aspect at this time during COVID is being used for is basically the inventiveness. I think the lockdown period has taught us a lot in terms of how we can efficiently use time. So a lot of hospitality players going through inventiveness. How can we reinvent things? How can we make it more efficient? What we didn't have time for in terms of inventing solutions, how are we actually putting that to fray? And most importantly, I think what is very, very relevant today, not only in hospitality, but in most of the industry, is how are we adapting ourselves to remain relevant in future? And I think as core business, be it any sector, that adaptation is now rooted to say, how fast are you able to adapt to a moving and a dynamic piece for you to still be relevant in business? And hospitality is no stranger to this, but the level of impact that hospitality is facing means that the adaptation is so much more deeper in terms of players, especially in hotels, who have to adapt to the new normal. So all these three are creating an overlap of itself, which is value. And I think everybody today is trying to discover what that value is and how do we leverage that value for long-term gains. So some indications during COVID on what is happening around the hospitality industry is the efficient usage of human capital. I guess with that being one of the highest employment sectors, the usage of the human capital is becoming increasingly important. I think both in times of the pandemic that is happening now, as well as how are we going to effectively bounce back with this human capital is also in mind all these leaders trying to say on how this human capital is going to be used. Great time to clean up on SOPs, preparation work for adapting to the new normal. So I guess, everybody understands across all industries that the new normal is not what it was before. And I think in hospitality, more than anything else, when I said that the three ethos of a hospitality player was networking, socializing, and meeting people, those three ethos are out of the door at this moment. And I think every hospitality player is trying to say, well, that's the new adaptation, that's the new normal. How are we as hospitality professionals going to adapt ourselves to the new normal? And once we've adapted, how are we going to ensure that we are leveraging the new normal to our advantage? I think it is also a great time for us to think through on what is efficient and what is not efficiently done by us. As said, hospitality being a huge fixed cost component player, now is the time to basically look at saying, are we really good at doing something what we were doing before? Or is it time for some other industry to come and take that over? I guess in this whole calamity lies an opportunity as well for the way the hospitality is going to be driving in future. And I also think that if you look at most of the boardrooms and most of the Zoom calls as boardrooms, every single leader in hospitality sector is looking at potential new revenue streams. So, I will give you some classic examples of what Marriott does or what Radisson does or what an Intercontinental does. With all these companies getting close, consultancy of the top level leadership is in play. They're willing to outsource their technical expertise to other operators, airlines, defense, various other places where there is a hospitality component for them to be a part of in basically looking at other areas of revenue streams for their companies, opposed to a very in-the-box traditional hotel streams that has happened for quite a long time to come. And also, I think what this has taught us today is the preparation of threats to the existing model of the revenues. I think we all understand today on how fast the revenue streams can go out of the window. Years and years of planning took just 3 weeks for it to go out of the window for most hotels. So I guess most of the planning became irrelevant, and the people who are able to cope better today and who are better prepared for the future is basically people who are able to understand and adapt to the future models of revenue likely to come. So I think during COVID, I think it's a great time to put these 5 points to usage wherever we can adapt ourselves to, but stressing out of the fact of basically saying efficient usage of human capital does not necessarily meaning firing or furloughing everybody as needed. It is basically to capitalize on their strengths, efficiently use it to basically ensure that when everything goes back, and I'm sure it will, you are rightly positioned to bounce back the fastest in the industry with the human capital that you basically are efficiently using. So that's some indication of during COVID. And post-COVID is an interesting exercise. At this moment of time, I think we are still looking at a Rubik's Cube to see how we're going to solve it. Do we see that fading away in the near future. When you read, you don't know how deep it is. But like I think we all hope and pray that this is going to pass off. So I think hospitality is one of the very few sectors, one of the very, very few sectors in the world which has gone through very minor disruptions for decades together. So if you take what hospitality was in hotels 50 years ago to what it is now 50 years later, there are very few adaptations that you can look at in hotels or a service in an airline. But by far, I think most of it, except for a few systems changing here and there has not been any major disruption of any kind. And I think we are staring at a time where this disruption is forced on hospitality players now to say what you have not done in the last 50 years. You are now forced to start thinking it in such a rude manner that you don't have any choice but to look at it. I think, there's another old saying, necessity is the mother of all inventions. I think that era of having to look at it has now dawned on most hoteliers like me, that we're looking at it and saying, yes, it is going to be the new normal. Disruptions is going to be the way of life, and we've got to start adapting to what the future needs. We had some fleeting glances of disruptions. I think if you look at Oyo as an experiment, it was a classic case of a disruption, with successes, without successes. That's quite debatable. But one thing for sure is it tried to disrupt and it tried to consolidate something very nice. And I think, over the years, I'm sure there'll be a lot more players who learn from these experiments and start doing more of those disruptions. Another classic disruption that we looked at was basically the Airbnb. That looked at a very specific segment of hospitality that it tried to disrupt, and it was very successful in doing so. But apart from these two fleeting glances, there was not any other major disruptions that happened. I think we are the player who've seen tests and who have seen perimeter hospitality. So when you were young, you did get telexes in all the hotels, and now you're doing Zoom calls. So I think nothing has changed in the hospitality for these disruptions. So just to give some indications of where the disruptions could go in. I think fundamentally, one of the most important disrupting factor in hospitality is definitely going to be technology. I think technology is very underused at this moment in hospitality. And I think whoever the entrepreneurs are on this forum today, I think if you are basically a tech entrepreneur, I think this is the right time for you to disrupt something in hospitality. I think people are craving for it. People are absolutely desperate. Hospitality leaders, need these solutions now more than any other time to ensure that there is technology that is embedded into their business. And it does not just lie with a property management system that's been lying there for 50 years. I think the new age hospitality is what is going to come back in future. And I think tech is going to be a very integral part of the new age of hospitality that's going to be coming in. In the near future, we saw, I'm sure all of us have been seeing various information on COVID coming across in various hospitals in Dubai, China, etc., where there's efficient use of robots that goes across to servicing rooms. These are hospitality leaders look at it and say, well, there has always been technology available, but it's, for some reason or the other, until this crisis has happened, hospitality players have been very reluctant in looking at technology as a very integral part of their business. I guess that's a definite change process that's going to happen. So anybody who's building technology around hospitality, I think it's a great time to be coming to the party. And I think it's a fantastic time to start consolidating the present doubts that the hospitality players have in how to solve the different pain points. The other aspect that we are seeing is actually food. Food and beverage by itself is going through transformation. Repeating back to what I said before, if our ethos were always about meeting people, socializing and networking, once that has been completely cut off, you are now stuck with something that's saying, I still want to satisfy my cravings, but unfortunately, I'm not able to go anywhere, because how long is the social distancing norm going to be there? We don't know. Is that going to be the way of life in the future? We don't know. There is a lot of ifs and buts that's coming in. But one thing is for sure, everybody is learning to adapt in terms of what the new normal is going to be. I guess a year ago or a year and a half, 2 years ago, when we looked at drones delivering pizzas, it was a wow. It was an absolute wow. We said, that's fantastic. It was more of a social media craze than anybody looking at it to say, well, is this going to be the future? And I think we are very close by there to say that, if it has been efficiently used in a place, why is it not adapted in more and more places to come? So are we going to see that coming in? Maybe we don't see drones coming into our apartments, but I definitely see something more concrete in technology trying to disrupt that whole delivery mechanism and making sure it's more automated, it's more mechanized, and it's more safer for people to understand that, yes, you are able to conduct your businesses the way you want it to be without posing a risk to yourself or a risk to the people that you're working or living with. We've also seen that a few of the big ticket hospitality sectors, when I did a couple of very important projects in Kuala Lumpur, big hotels, big sectors, etc. So a segment of MICE, that is meetings, incentives, conferences, and events, were one of the bread and butter for a lot of cities, Kuala Lumpur, Bangkok, Macau. So if you see any of these places, they always used to rely on these huge meetings, incentives, conferences, events, etc. Now, with all these social distancing norms that are coming in, you can just imagine what these hotels will do, which have invested billions and billions to host hundreds and thousands of people in one destination. Suddenly it's all out of the window. How do we use that space? That space is already available today, and the hospitality players are desperate to get out of every square feet that they've invested on. So as entrepreneurs, I think there is also a great time for us to look at alternative revenue streams as a solution to these hospitality players who've invested billions and billions of dollars in trying to create spaces which may or may not be the future scope of hospitality at all. If you turn around today and say, we're going to have a meeting of 50,000 people under a hotel tomorrow, which is quite normal about a year ago, that's the new normal. That's never going to happen. Do we foresee that happening in the near future? No, not even in the wildest of dreams. To walk to a bar at the moment is a distant dream. Then you can imagine 50,000 people under one roof. So again, as entrepreneurs, I think it's a great opportunity for anybody to look at to say, real estate, what do we do with this real estate? Is there any solution that the hospitality players can have for solving these pain points of investments that have actually gone through? And I think that's a great model again. So I think apart from technology, what this COVID pandemic has done to hospitality players is, I believe it's going to create a new age of entrepreneurs. And I think it's going to get those entrepreneurs back in shape who are tech savvy, who are absolutely in line with what real estate has to offer today. And they are the ones who are going to come back with solutions to the pain points that hospitality owners have, who've been traditionally looking at very high fixed costs, very low yields, etc., looking at more brick and mortar rather than any other models of business. I think this is going to fundamentally challenge that in getting across new revenue streams. So if I was going to be an entrepreneur to look at solutions in hospitality, there is no better time than now. I think it's a great time to come up with concepts for hospitality. And I think you've got the whole world begging for it to say, I need solutions to start making money. So any idea today to hospitality players as an entrepreneur is going to be a fantastic idea that they can embrace. When we're talking about real estate, I think there is a lot of other fulcrums of hospitality that is used as well. We are looking at supply chain, the last minute logistics of producers. We're looking at automation of tasks within the hospitality sector, whether it's hotels, whether we are automating check-in processes, we are automating room cleaning, we are automating the windows cleaning, etc. I think suddenly that automation is the buzzword where we believe that this is going to be sturdier in future in terms of ensuring that we are not working in an environment with bloated costs, so that we are able to manage our costs better. So we are looking at this exponential growth and no longer this traditional growth that hospitality was always good for. Apart from technology and entrepreneurship, the positives that have come across from COVID is this dynamic adaptability. I think, hoteliers, hospitality was always adaptable. It's the first industry which goes through the crisis and the last industry to bounce back from a crisis. Traditionally, that's always been the case. You're the first one to go under the tires. You're the last one to come out of the tires. But I guess what this actually has shown the hospitality players is that the adaptability has become even more dynamic. That forces them to say, let's pass this and we will come back to normal, is no longer in the discussion. The discussion today is let's pass this and let's work with people who are able to offer better solutions to help us run our business more efficiently. And I think that's a fundamental shift that hospitality leadership is going through today, to say we need partners from technology, we need partners from supply chain, we need partners from real estate solutions, we need partners across the spectrum to come back to us and say, how are we going to solve the pain point and make more money out of the square feet that we invested? And we're not looking at the traditional brick and mortar model again. So I guess dynamic adaptability is one very positive thing that's come back from this crisis. And the other trend that we are seeing, and another sentiment that we are seeing, is where the fixed costs are very high. Models which worked on high fixed costs, I think that's going out of the window already. I think everybody understands that this crisis has taught people on how to basically work lean, how to basically ensure that you're cutting the flab, working on as minimal fixed costs as possible, and as much as possible with variables. Now, again, the trend and the sentiments that are going in for the people in the F&B businesses in this particular forum, a great opportunity for you to go to a hotel and say, let me take your restaurant. 80 people out of the 100 owners that you will talk to will happily give that to you, because that's a sunk cost and a fixed cost that they were dealing with. So are we going to see more and more experts running the F&B component of hotels? I think so. I think if you look at us in Isthara CoLiving, we are looking at various factors on how we are going to leverage our existing strengths. So I guess as an F&B entrepreneur, now is the right time to go to hotels and basically say, we are able to manage your bar better when it comes back within the framework of what we can do. We are able to manage your restaurants better in terms of producing more value for the buck that you've actually invested. So I guess that part of business is going to be more and more prevalent as we go, that people are going to shy away from these fixed cost models and start going across to variable costs. So again, as an entrepreneur, great opportunity to look at F&B business differently, to say you have something invested on. How are you able to add value to these hospitality players who are desperately looking for solutions at this moment? Shared resources. I think a lot of consulting companies today are looking at how we are doing it. Now, let me tell you what the hospitality wants. Hospitality wants shared resources. Do we want to have one GM for every hotel? No. We might want to have two GMs for 3 hotels, or one GM for 5 hotels. So that shared resources mechanism is going to be more and more that's going to be coming in. It's going to challenge the very existence of a hierarchy chart that existed in the hospitality sector for decades together. I think that's fundamentally challenged. A consultation company, if any of you are working in consultation, great time to put some thoughts together in terms of how are we able to combine resources that offers solutions to these hospitality players by and large. So I guess, there's a lot of components that's going to be coming into play: common purchasing, common finance. So, accounting firms, great opportunity to outsource the books of a hotel. Consulting firms, great opportunity to consolidate the purchasing of 10, 15 hotels under one ambit. So I guess, what this has really created now is that entire hierarchy of the hotel has gone through a major change. And all these are posing as different opportunities for entrepreneurs to start leveraging in this time of crisis, and understanding that this is the way it's going to go. It's going to pose more and more of a solution to these hospitality players. So, is this the way forward? I guess this is just the basic ebb of what our discussions have been. When we look at what post-COVID could drive in, and the 5 or 6 points that I've mentioned is only the initial factor. And those initial points are, again, taken into far deep-rooted solutions based on the transaction discussions that you're actually going through. So in all the calamity, do I see an opportunity? I see a humongous opportunity that hospitality is going to finally come of age and finally get disrupted the way it has to get disrupted. And it is not another superficial disruption that it has been going through for the last 40 to 50 years. So I think if you are able to declutter our minds to this pandemic, I think there is some exciting news in hospitality that is likely to come. There is a lot of excitement in new partnerships, new technology. So all of us who are building those values, I think hospitality is going to be one of the a very good performing sectors in the future with this new adapted model. Yeah, so I that's all I have. I've done 35 minutes as said. I'm open to taking any questions now.